Peer editing groups, I don't do peer editing groups. I think they're really hard to do in person, much less online, but you may be asked to work in a peer editing group where other students are looking at your paper. It's certainly, there's nothing wrong with sharing your paper with other students who are also doing the same assignment, because I think that helps you get a sense of what everybody else is doing, and they may understand the assignment in a way that can help you, or you might help them. The problem is that a lot of students really don't feel like they know enough about writing to be very good peer editors. So if you're going to do that, again, sometimes just let somebody else read it and say, what do you think about this? Do you think this really does what she wants with the assignment? And so then here's a checklist for peer editing if you want to do that. So strategies for revising. This is just going to be, again, oh, sorry. I was like, wait a second. Didn't we already do this? I wonder why that looped around. That's weird. Um, so the rest of this chapter is just some examples of things that you can look at. That was really bizarre how that should have gone to the next section, but they do give a student's paper and they show multiple stages of that being revised. So again, you can look there if you want to see an actual specific example of someone doing that. So let's talk about editing and proofreading. So this is the next stage of the writing process, and this involves, again, looking at, now that you've got your essay 95% set, you're really not going to do much more changing of your content or ideas. Now you're going to look at how have you presented it. So here you're going to look for grammatical errors, punctuation, style, word choice, right? Those kind of things. Now, you can still revise. Remember, writing is a recursive process. So you might notice while you're editing for grammar that, oh, I totally left out this really important part of this second paragraph, and you have to go in and write that, and you might need to revise it, right? Revision can take part in any stage. But at this point, you want to really kind of, that's probably just going to be on some last minute tweaks or like big oopses that you totally overlooked. You don't really want to start editing unless you're pretty sure that 95% of that paper is set, right? So grammar is looking at things like subject verb agreement. So I'm going to scroll down to this checklist that they've got at the bottom here. It kind of walks you through some of the more common things, right? So the thing that the book tells you in all of these little sections here in this chapter is that there are more common mistakes that freshman writers make than others. And so when you're editing, look at those mistakes. Look for those most common patterns of errors that most people make that to guide your editing, right? And then once you really get to know yourself as a writer, you're going to be able to pick out what are those things that I tend to do and what are the things that I don't tend to make mistakes on, right? You might be a really great speller, so you don't have to really worry about checking spelling, but you may have a problem writing fragments. So you should focus then, whenever you're editing a paper, know yourself, know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then focus your editing on those things. And these, again, are just some common problems that people have. Your textbook, if you look down here, actually, you can just search. So if I want to, where is my search? Well, I'm not sure where the search thing is, but you should be able to search and just like type in run-ons. But you can come down here and, sorry, it's down here somewhere. There is a section that's just going to talk to you about things like run-ons and those kind of things. I also have some of those learning adaptive quizzes that are bonus. Right, okay, here we go. So here you can see sentence style, parallel structure, adjectives and adverbs. So you can look here. So comma splices and fused sentences. This is the section that helps you with run-ons and comma splices. For some reason, people want to start calling run-ons fused sentences. I call them run-ons. But here you go. You've got an example. You've got definitions of what's wrong. Then you've got different strategies that you can use to fix these things. So if I'm telling you in your essay, if you're saying CS for comma splice or RO for run-on, then you know what you need to be working on to fix your essays. And this is where you can go to get information about how to do that. Okay, so we're going to come back here. So again, the end of that is just what some of those most common problems are. So the next thing to look for is punctuation, right? And again, there are certain more common errors than others. Focus on these. And you've got your little checklist here that kind of looks at, commas, semicolons, apostrophes, quotation marks, right? What are these problems that you have? Punctuation might not be that important to you, but punctuation is just another way of communicating. And if your punctuation is incorrect, you may be hampering your reader to really understand what you're talking about. The next thing we're going to do with editing is you're going to look at sentence style and word choice, right? So sentence style, again, this is about making sure your essay is clear and readable, that it's convincing, right? That you've got varied but concise sentences so that you're not getting into this monotonous pattern of using the same type, right? You want to make sure that your writing is free of cliches, right? So again, you have some areas here, awkward phrasing, you get some before and after here. Then you've got a nice link to see more information, right? So use those links if this is something that I'm telling you. So I will write AWK on your paper if there's an awkward passage. Make sure that your sentences are concise. So concise isn't about how many words that you're saying something. Some people want to think that concise means short. Concise basically means that you have written the most effectively, that every word in there is precise and it is the simplest and most straightforward way of saying something, right? You also are going to eliminate repetition and redundancy, empty words and expressions, right? So nothing that isn't necessary. So we can see here, here's the wordy sentence and here's the concise sentence. So oftentimes conciseness does mean shorter, but it isn't necessarily shorter. It basically means that you've expressed yourself in the most effective way possible. Right now, we also want to make sure that we have various sentence links. You're going to mix long and short sentences, right? And they give you some examples. Here are, again, the types of sentences: simple, compound, and complex, right? And so, again, you've got a link that will give you more information. Make sure you're using transitional words and phrases because that's what helps your reader connect ideas. If you're just putting those sentences out there without those connections, your reader can get lost. So they give you some examples with a link to sections about transitions. Then make sure that your words are the most specific and most appropriate word for that, right? So again, you can see some examples of vague versus specific, cliches versus writing without cliches, inaccurate versus accurate, right? And here is your little checklist that you can use. And then the last thing you're going to do is you're going to use proofreading. And sometimes this is considered the last step of the writing process. That means that before you turn it in, you're going to go over it one more time very quickly with just looking for stray errors, right? Now, one thing here that they haven't mentioned that is after that, and that's checking your paper's format. That comes in, I think, in the publishing phase of the writing process. And I see more and more books are including that as the last phase, that publishing. So we'll talk about that here. But again, proofreading, just go through, look for those stray mistakes, typos, that kind of thing.